On the night of January 17, 1961, a man was driven into a forest clearing in the Katanga province of the Congo. He had been beaten so severely during transit that witnesses could barely recognize his face. His glasses were gone. His shirt was torn. He had been a head of state 11 weeks earlier. What happened in that clearing took approximately an hour. When it was over, the men responsible were so concerned about evidence that they returned the following day, dug up the body, and dissolved it in sulfuric acid. They kept 2 teeth and a bullet as souvenirs. His name was Patrice Lumumba. He was the first democratically elected Prime Minister of the Republic of Congo. He was 35 years old, and declassified documents from the United States government confirm that the CIA had been actively plotting his murder for months before anyone put a bullet in him. What those documents don't fully answer, what 3 governments spent decades making sure you couldn't answer, is who gave the final order. You're about to go looking for it. To understand why the most powerful intelligence agency on Earth wanted a 35-year-old African prime minister dead, you need to understand what the Congo represented in 1960. The Democratic Republic of Congo is not a small country with limited resources. It is one of the most mineral-rich territories on the planet. Uranium, the same uranium used in the atomic bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, had been mined in the Congo's Katanga province since the 1940s. The country also held massive reserves of cobalt, copper, diamonds, and tin. Whoever controlled the Congo controlled the material foundations of the Cold War arms race. For 80 years, that control had belonged to Belgium. The Belgian Congo was not a colony, it was an extraction machine. The Belgian government and a network of private corporations had systematically stripped the territory of its resources while deliberately preventing Congolese people from acquiring education, professional skills, or political experience. When independence arrived in 1960, there were fewer than 30 university graduates in a country of 15 million people. There was not a single Congolese officer above the rank of sergeant in the entire national army. Belgium had not expected independence to arrive when it did. Neither had Washington. But on June 30, 1960, the Republic of Congo became a sovereign nation, and its people had elected, as their prime minister, a man who said openly, publicly, and without diplomatic hedging, exactly what he intended to do with that sovereignty. Patrice Lumumba intended to keep the Congo's resources for the Congolese. That single position, stated plainly at his Independence Day speech in front of the Belgian king, made him the most dangerous man in Central Africa to 3 governments simultaneously. Lumumba had been in office for 67 days when the crisis began. Within weeks of independence, the Congolese army mutinied against its Belgian officers. Belgium, without authorization from the new Congolese government, sent troops back into the country to protect Belgian nationals and, not incidentally, Belgian mining interests. The mineral-rich Katanga province, led by a Belgian-backed politician named Moise Tshombe, declared itself a separate state. Lumumba appealed to the United Nations. The UN sent peacekeepers, but their mandate explicitly prevented them from helping suppress the Katanga secession. Lumumba then made the decision that sealed his fate. He asked the Soviet Union for military assistance. In Washington, that request landed on the desk of President Dwight D. Eisenhower and his CIA director, Allen Dulles, like a match dropped into dry timber. The Cold War calculus was immediate and absolute. A Soviet-aligned government controlling the uranium deposits of Central Africa was categorically unacceptable. What followed is documented in the CIA's own declassified records, in the 1975 Church Committee report, and in decades of subsequent investigative scholarship. On August 18, 1960, at a National Security Council meeting, President Eisenhower reportedly authorized the removal of Lumumba from power. The word used in the meeting notes, according to the Church Committee's findings, was interpreted by CIA Director Allen Dulles as authorization for assassination. Whether Eisenhower explicitly said the word, or whether Dulles chose to hear what he needed to hear, is one of the central unresolved questions of the entire case. What is not disputed? The CIA began planning to kill Patrice Lumumba within weeks of that meeting. The CIA's chief scientist, Dr. Sidney Gottlieb, the same man who ran the agency's MK-Ultra mind control program, was dispatched to the Congo carrying a biological toxin specifically formulated to cause a fatal disease that would appear natural. The plan was to poison Lumumba's toothbrush. The operation failed. Gottlieb returned to Washington. The toothbrush was never used. But the intent had been established, and the CIA's station chief in Leopoldville, Lawrence Devlin, continued receiving instructions to neutralize Lumumba by any means available. Meanwhile, the political situation inside the Congo was collapsing. Lumumba was removed from office by the Congolese president, Joseph Kasavubu, in a move widely believed to have been encouraged by American and Belgian operatives. The Congolese army's new commander, a colonel named Joseph Desire Mobutu, who was simultaneously on the CIA's payroll, placed Lumumba under house arrest. In November 1960, Lumumba escaped. He attempted to reach his political stronghold in Stanleyville. He was recaptured by Mobutu's forces on December 1st. What happened to him in custody over the following 6 weeks was documented by UN observers and subsequent human rights investigations as systematic torture. On January 17, 1961, Lumumba and 2 of his ministers, Maurice Mpolo and Joseph Okido, were flown to Katanga, to Chambe's territory, to the one place in the Congo where there was zero possibility of political intervention on their behalf. The Belgian government, declassified Belgian parliamentary records confirm this, had operatives on the ground coordinating the transfer. A Belgian police commissioner named Franz Verscher oversaw the execution site. The firing squad was reportedly commanded by a Belgian officer. Patrice Lumumba, Maurice Mpolo, and Joseph Okido were shot against a tree, one at a time, on the night of January 17, 1961. The following day, a Belgian police officer named Gerard Sout and his brother returned to the site, disinterred the bodies, and dissolved them in sulfuric acid. Sout would later tell a Belgian journalist, on camera, that he kept 2 of Lumumba's teeth as a personal memento. He produced them during the interview. The assassination of Patrice Lumumba did not stabilize the Congo. It did not protect Western interests cleanly or permanently. What it did, with a brutal generational efficiency, was shatter the possibility of democratic self-governance in Central Africa for decades. Joseph Mobutu, the CIA's man, the colonel who had arrested Lumumba, seized total power in 1965. He renamed the country Zaire. He renamed himself Mobutu Sese Seko, a name that roughly translates, in his own formulation, as the all-powerful warrior who goes from conquest to conquest leaving fire in his wake. He ruled for 32 years. Mobutu's regime was catastrophic by any metric. He looted an estimated $4 to $15 billion from the Congolese state, a country where the average citizen earned less than $1 a day. He maintained power through systematic torture, political murder, and the deliberate destruction of any institutional infrastructure that might threaten his personal control. The United States supported him throughout, not reluctantly, actively, because he was reliably anti-communist, because he allowed American access to Congolese uranium and cobalt, because he was, in the Cold War calculus, useful. When Mobutu finally fell in 1997, ousted by a rebel movement backed by Rwanda and Uganda, the Congo had no functioning judiciary, no reliable national army, no intact public health system, and no political class that had ever been permitted to develop genuine governance experience. What followed was not peace. It was a series of overlapping conflicts, the Congo Wars, that killed an estimated 5 to 6 million people between 1996 and 2003, making it the deadliest conflict on Earth since World War II. Historians and political scientists who study Central African instability draw a documented, traceable line from that violence back to January 17, 1961. Remove Lumumba. Install Mobutu. Allow Mobutu to hollow out every institution for 32 years. Then remove Mobutu and discover that there is nothing left beneath him. The Lumumba assassination also fundamentally altered the relationship between newly independent African nations and Western governments for a generation. The message received across the continent was precise and unmistakable. Democratic elections that produce leaders committed to genuine resource sovereignty will not be tolerated. The infrastructure of colonialism, the mining contracts, the corporate arrangements, the economic dependency, would be protected by force if necessary. That message shaped African politics, African skepticism of Western institutions, and African approaches to sovereignty in ways that are still actively felt today. It took 40 years for a government to formally acknowledge responsibility. In 2001, after a 4-year parliamentary investigation, the Belgian government officially admitted its role in the assassination of Patrice Lumumba. The investigation found that Belgian officials had been present at the execution, had coordinated the transfer of Lumumba to Katanga knowing he would be killed, and that the Belgian state bore what the parliamentary report called, in its own language, moral responsibility for his death. Belgium apologized. No one was prosecuted. Gerard Sout, the man who dissolved Lumumba's body in acid and kept his teeth, had died in 2000, 1 year before the investigation concluded. His daughter retained one of the teeth. In 2016, the Belgian government formally requested its return. In 2022, 61 years after the murder, a gold-capped tooth, confirmed by DNA analysis to belong to Patrice Lumumba, was returned to his family in a state ceremony in Brussels. That is what remained of a democratically elected head of state, a single tooth, returned 6 decades later by the government that helped kill him. The United States has never formally acknowledged its role. The Church Committee's 1975 report established CIA intent and planning beyond reasonable historical dispute. Lawrence Devlin, the CIA station chief, lived until 2008 and gave occasional interviews in which he maintained that he had personally refused a direct order to poison Lumumba, though he acknowledged the order had come. He denied that CIA involvement had extended to the final execution. His denial has not been definitively confirmed or refuted by any subsequently declassified document. The question of who gave the final order, the precise chain of command between the National Security Council meeting in August 1960 and the firing squad in January 1961, remains, in the specific sense of courtroom standard documentation, unresolved. What the documents do confirm, collectively and unambiguously, the United States government wanted Patrice Lumumba dead, made operational plans to kill him, and, whether or not a CIA officer physically participated in the execution, created the political and military conditions that made his murder not only possible, but, within the logic of the situation they had engineered, inevitable. In law, there is a concept called proximate cause. You do not have to fire the gun to be responsible for where the bullet lands. Patrice Lumumba's son, Francois Lumumba, has spent decades calling for full accountability from both Belgium and the United States. He has said publicly that the tooth returned to his family in 2022 was not justice. That justice would require documents, names, the complete chain of command. Those documents, if they exist in unredacted form, remain classified. Patrice Lumumba gave his Independence Day speech on June 30, 1960. He was dead by January 17, 1961, 201 days as Prime Minister. In that speech, the one that made 3 governments decide he had to go, he said something that has never been fully answered. He said the Congo's independence was not a gift from Belgium. It was taken, earned. And he asked his people to remember that the struggle to truly own their own land, their own resources, their own future, was not finished on the day the flag changed. He was right. And the people who proved him right were the ones who killed him. Here is the question I want you to sit with. If the United States was willing to assassinate a democratically elected leader in 1961 and then classify the evidence for 60 years, what obligation does the current government have to the people of the Congo? To Lumumba's family? To the historical record? And who, exactly, gave the final order? Drop your answer below. And if you know a buried chapter of history that the powerful have spent decades trying to keep quiet, a tainted century is still listening.